We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we're going to be looking at the Ukraine versus Russia conflict and how that impacts the United States and the wider world. Also on the show, we have a very special guest, a Ukrainian soldier, who gives us a behind-the-scenes look at what it's like in Ukraine, what the relationships are with Washington, D.C., and how the war is going. It's going to be quite the show. Remember, Liberty Nation Radio is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access breaking news, podcasts, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. The war in Ukraine continues apace, but there is movement on the other side of the Atlantic, especially in the U.S. Congress. Now, to talk about this and the ongoing problems that Ukraine faces with the Russian war, we're lucky to be joined by Liberty Nation's national security correspondent, Mr. Dave Patterson. Dave, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be on your show.
So, Dave, let's start with the latest stuff. Aid packages proceeding apace. Now, what's in the Ukrainian aid package?
Well, mostly it's ammunition, but a lot of people are confused about this. They think that the aid package, the Ukraine portion of the 90 billion, will go immediately to build 155 millimeter shells, but it's not really. It's the replenishment, for the most part, of ammunition that we have already sent. It's replacing stores. The thing that is the most, I think, troubling about all of this is that, they finally passed it, but it's an omnibus. It's got Israel, it's got a bunch of other stuff in it, and so it was never voted on as a bill for looking at who is in favor of actually doing this.
Yeah, there was a lot of contention that, especially on the Republican side, but that there was nothing for the U.S. border, but there was plenty for Israel and Taiwan, among other things. Now, you've got an idea that the Republicans almost fell into a trap with this, right?
Yeah, I think they did. I mean, the Democrats and the progressives want to push a narrative that it's binary. You're either for Ukraine or you're not. And if you're not, you're bad. And if you are for it, then you're good. But that's not the issue at all. The issue is, why should American taxpayers pay for things that they do not have any idea as to what the end state will be? The Biden administration has absolutely failed in this effort. Tell me, if you can, what is the end state? What will this look like if somebody wins?
Well, I think that's probably the most important question, and it's really the topic that I wanted to discuss today. So it's nice that that's dovetailed, Dave, because there doesn't appear to be an exit strategy. So there's this round of, let's call it what it is, right? It's munitions aid, right? That's what it is.
That's correct.
So there's this, but munitions, by their very nature, get used, and they get used up. And so either Ukraine's going to somehow defeat Russia with this next tranche of munitions aid, or they're not. And I think it's highly unlikely that they're going to defeat Russia with this next tranche of munitions aid, which means that there's another one by necessity further down the line. Otherwise, they're just wasting all this munitions aid in the first place anyway, right? And it brings it back to your point that there really doesn't seem to be an exit strategy being proposed. And what I want to ask is, where are the peacemakers here? Nobody seems to be talking about, well, let's pull everybody together. Let's try and find a way out of this war that doesn't suck up the global economy, which is what it's doing, that doesn't risk the nations being pulled into a war that they don't want to be involved in. But nobody's looking for a resolution, as far as I can tell, Dave.
I think you're right on that. And I think it goes back to, if you don't know what the end state looks like that you want to achieve, then you have no negotiating power to sit down and talk about peace. What does peace look like? Does it mean that we go back to where we were in April of 2014? That's not going to work. Nobody believes that that will work. And On the other hand, could you go to a circumstance where, okay, uh, the Donbass region, Crimea, fine, but we want, Mariupol back
Hmm.
and that port and that industrial city. But they just don't have an idea as to what it is that the end state looks like. And I hate to keep saying that, but that's really the issue here. And you made a very important point. Ammunition, they're consumables, just
Hmm.
like food. Every day you have to eat something, or maybe you can go a couple of days, but food is a consumable. Ammunition is a consumable, and it has to be constantly replenished. And you look at what Ukraine on their best day, they're using 8,000 rounds of 155 millimeter howitzer shells. They're down to 2,000, and they're husbanding these extremely closely now.
Yeah, it's it, I think that no matter how useful this present munitions aid is, it's really just a shorter matter of time before the next one needs to be fulfilled. Otherwise, you're literally sending good money after bad in this term, if that's what, if you want to continue supporting the efforts there. Now, um, there's been some recent news on Joe Biden, or at least members of the cabinet, discussing sending military advisors over to Ukraine. Now, Dave, you're writing this up on a piece for LibertyNation.com. But you think this is a slippery slope, right? Could you explain that?
Well, I do. I mean, we've been here before. We've seen this movie. In Vietnam, we started out with less than 1,000 advisors. Then we had 1,500 advisors. And then pretty soon you looked at 6,000 advisors. And before we were done, we had an army of over 560,000 in Vietnam. And we know how that turned out. The point again here, what are you advising the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian military to do? Is it just to beat up on the Russians as much as you can? Uh, there's a if I thought that they were going over to do something like strategic information operations where you destroy the Russian morale, and that would be one thing, but we're not entirely clear as to what these advisors would do. And except that we do know that in a recent Pentagon press briefing, that Major General Ryder, the press secretary for the Pentagon, said that they would not be in combat. Well, that's what they said. That's what they've said before. But if you're out on the line where you really need to be advising on how to do things, that's a very fine line.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how you interpret the rules of engagement for yourself at that particular moment, right?
That's exactly right. And most of it is self-preservation.
Yes, so I can see how that would be quite escalatory if you have a bunch of US military advisors at the front lines or near the front lines where the training, whatever training that is due to be delivered, and then they come under fire. They're not allowed to fire back, and if they do fire back, that's US soldiers on the ground in Ukraine fighting,
Engaged in combat.
engaged in combat, and I think that's yeah. I mean, sure, the Pentagon, sorry, the Pentagon, the Kremlin. I got those two confused, Dave. Please don't ask me why.
These days, it's
The
probably easy
Kremlin,
to do.
the Kremlin will absolutely spin that, and rightly so in this occasion, that U.S. troops are on the ground firing at Russians, and that's an engagement of war, and that is something that literally changes the entire theater, I think. Now, has nobody told President Biden or his cabinet that this is likely a bad idea? Just 30 seconds on that, please, Dave.
I doubt it. You have an administration that, first of all, they come up with the worst idea they possibly could, and then they give it to the toadies to support. And I'm sure that there are people who say, we have to be cautious. I mean, there are some people left, who have a sense of being an adult. But at the same time, as we know, when President Biden decides that he's going to do something stupid, there is no one that's going to get in his way of accomplishing stupid.
Dave, let's just hope that Ukraine doesn't become this generation's Vietnam. Dave Patterson, thanks ever so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Happy to be with you.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.